Hey, this is Dr. Cesar Livar with another episode of the Way to College podcast. And, one of the exciting things about the podcast has been scouring the internet and the networks, my network of incredible folks to identify guests. And so my guest today, I don't know how I connected with my guest. I think it was over social media and then through just common connections, network connections. But Felipe, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners out there?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. My name is Felipe Hinojosa. I am a professor of history at Texas A&M University and the newly appointed assistant provost for HSI initiatives here at Texas A&M. I've been at Texas A&M for 13 years, and but I was born and raised in Brownsville, Texas. So I'm from the Valley. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why we came together, right? The connection to the Valley.
Yeah, I think so. So, Felipe, I always ask all of my guests, I say, if you had to go and identify a starting point in your educational journey, where would that be for you?
1996, no doubt. I was working at Sears in the hardware department, selling paint. I had graduated high school in 1995, and I had just bought a brand new Ford Ranger truck, beautiful truck, because I was making zero money at Sears, but I was making money, and I thought, this is it, man. Like, I've arrived. And like every other teenager in Brownsville in the 90s, I was partying in Matamoros almost every weekend and had great friends and all of that. But there was a point where, I don't remember what it was, but there was a point where I thought, if I don't leave Brownsville, I'm not going to do anything. And granted, don't misunderstand me. I didn't have big dreams. It wasn't like I want to do this or that. I wanted to coach high school football, and I wanted to teach history in high school. That's all I wanted to do in life. And so, but I knew that going to Texas Southmost College in Brownsville, as great of an institution as that was, I was not motivated to go to class. It was just high school all over again. I ran into the same people. We were all skipping class. We thought, let's just go to McDonald's and get some breakfast and get some coffee, and we'll get out of here. Why does this even matter? Then I saw in my church, in my home church, I saw an opportunity to participate in what they called an anti-racism drama team. And they were advertising this for the summer of 1996. The idea, and the church was organizing it. This was a large nonprofit organization that was organizing this. And what they wanted were African-American and Latino youth to come together, go out to California, and spend June, July, and August driving around in a van, putting on skits and dramas, talking about race and racism in our own lives and our own experiences. Blew my mind. First of all, I'm a theater person, so I loved it. I wanted to do some theater. Second of all, I wanted to get out of Brownsville. I applied. I bugged the office, because the central offices for the organization putting this whole thing together, and I can send you a picture of the group, but the organization putting this team together was in Akron, Pennsylvania. They were part of the Mennonite, they called themselves Mennonite Central Committee. Still an active organization. You can look them up online, mcc.org. Great organization. They do a lot of social justice work all over the world. I applied, I got in, and I spent the summer traveling with 4 African-American women from Michigan, Virginia, New York, and Florida. One Mexican American or Mexican immigrant, mostly woman from California, and another Mexicano guy from California as well. So there were like 7 of us. And that was the moment. That summer did it for me. I mean, I could go on and on about what was significant, but just to get to the point, all of the people that I was on that tour group with, we would spend every single day together. We would talk about how race and racism had impacted and shaped our lives. But most importantly, I was the only one in that group who did not have an upward trajectory.
No.
So everybody else on the group was doing very well in college, second, third year, fourth year college students. They were doing very well. They were shocked to hear that my GPA was below 2.0. They were shocked to hear that I didn't really attend class and was not really motivated in college. And many of them would pull me to the side and say, you know, you've got to get your act together. You've got to do something. So it was that nudging from 5 women, by the way, 4 Black women and 1 Mexicana. And that summer of being in a van, traveling from San Diego to Seattle to Tucson and back and forth, talking about issues that affect all of us. I fell in love with reading. I fell in love with these sort of deep conversations. I remember we went to go watch that film, A Time to Kill, with Matthew McConaughey and Sam Jackson. And we went to go have coffee afterwards. And we were talking about race and the South and black and white tensions and where Latinos fit in all of that. And I fell in love, man. I mean, I fell in love with the world of ideas. And that was the summer that changed my life.
That's a great story. Now, I want to. I mean, there are a lot of different ways we can go with.
By the way, I married that Mexicana on that team. I should just get that out there.
Yeah, you can't overlook that. Thank you.
I just want to put that out there right now.
You know, to at that point, you joined this troop, this group, and I remember I grew up in the Valley. I'm from Elsa. And I'd never experienced overt racism until I left the Valley. Had you, prior to that moment, had you experienced racism? And would you mind telling us about that experience? What was that?
Oh, without a doubt. So, I mean, I had grown up leaving the Valley because Dad was a minister in the Mennonite church. And when you're a minister in the Mennonite church, there really aren't too many other Mennonite churches in the Valley. There are a few, but not many. And Dad would go, the church would host all of these conferences in Kansas, Nebraska, Indiana, Illinois, Oklahoma. And we would spend at least once every summer, there was some sort of church camp, church conference that Dad would go to. Dad was one of the representatives for kind of the Latino wing of the Mennonite church in those days. So, you know, as kids, we would always go. And my first sort of coming to the realization that I was different from my white peers was realized. It was very clear to me that I was not white, you know, like that. And it was in terms of socioeconomics, it was in terms of culture, it was in the terms of language, the way that we spoke versus the way they spoke, the level of education that they had versus the level of education that my dad maybe finished 6th grade and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, the same thing. You know, my parents were migrant farm workers. All of these folks, there was a sense of generational wealth that they had, you know, experienced. And so the sense of difference and being otherized came early in my life. And then I'll never forget an experience that we had as a family. We took a road trip. I have 5 sisters and 1 brother. So we're a big family. Maybe 94, maybe I was about to finish high school, something like that. We took a big family road trip to Florida. And I'll never forget stopping at, I don't know if it was a Denny's restaurant or kind of a diner kind of subset, but we could feel the tensions as soon as we walked into that restaurant. I could feel them. Mm-hmm. And we had people staring at us. And we finally had the waitress who told us after we had finished our meal that it would be best if we would just leave quickly and quietly.
Wow.
And they were actually, you know, basically saying you don't even need to pay for the meal. Like I don't know if people had grown angry over the time that we were there. Wow. I don't know if we were just loud, whatever it was. Yeah. But I remember very, very vividly my brother, who was older than me. I was in high school. My brother was already, you know, he's 14 years older than me. So he was the one kind of handling everything. And I just remember, you know, the sense of bewilderment,
Yeah.
of the kind of treatment that we got at that restaurant by the staff the entire time we were there. And then to be asked to leave at the end was kind of the moment of just kind of deep and complete shock. And we've always been, I don't know if this is just a Valley thing or what, but our family was always very kind of, maybe it was a religious thing too, very compliant. Yes, sir. No, no, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And we walked out of there, and I'll never forget that experience. It taught me earlier probably than some of my peers in high school or elementary school in Brownsville of kind of the realities with racism in society. So when I saw that opportunity that summer, this was maybe 2 years after that incident had happened. I was ready for it. I wanted to engage in those kinds of conversations, and I wanted to talk to different people about what that meant for us.
Yeah.
And I also was not naive to the kind of intra-Latino tensions, the colorism that exists within our community. So even in our group of African Americans and Latinos, we talked about Black and brown tensions. We talked about what it would mean if one of my sisters would have brought an African American home. How would my parents react? It never happened, so I don't know. But we talked about all that stuff because we knew that race and racism was not the sole domain of white people, right? That this is something that can affect all of us.
Yeah. The interesting thing about your story and all of it is the complexities. Here you are, right? And before we jumped on, we talked about sort of your religious background.
Yeah.
And sort of the growing up with a social, as social justice being a part of your life, right? And being part of the church that you grew up in. So you've got that experience, that background, you have these experiences with race. And like you said, you're ready to have these conversations. What was going on with you? You're attending college. You said your GPA is below a 2.0. And I asked that because and this is obviously biased towards my own experience, but with a lot of folks that I talk to, college often provides that space where we can engage in those conversations, where it's like, all right, now this is the space. Now it's a safe space. Folks want to have these conversations. I can ask these questions now. Was that not happening, or what was going on with you at the time that?
No, that wasn't happening at all with me. I still had, I played high school football, man. I had that mindset. Again, I had to make payments on my new truck, which, by the way, one of my sisters, after I got back from my summer in '96, made me go and return the truck. She didn't make me, but she advised me deeply. She said, look, if you have aspirations to go to college, you can't have a car payment. Yeah. You've got to give this up because mom and dad don't have any money to help you. And you're not going to be able to be out there alone with a $300 or whatever dollar payment. And then to pay for insurance too, as a male under the age of 25 at the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't registering for me that knowledge equaled the kind of deconstruction of power in society, right? That I could take the knowledge that I was ignoring in history class, that the knowledge that I was ignoring in English or in biology and whatever seminar or lab that I was taking, that knowledge could lead to a greater understanding of the way power works and power dynamics. That didn't register for me until that summer of '96, right? So I came back completely transformed. You talk to any of my homeboys that I still talk to today, and they will tell you that I came back a different person, completely, almost unrecognizable, probably, because I went back to class. I was intense. I wanted to talk. I had a whole summer of having these great conversations with people that lived in New York City, urban areas and rural areas. And the woman that I eventually married, who was an immigrant, worked in the fields in California, picking grapes and all of that. And I'm this kid from Brownsville that's just trying to find his way. Yeah. And I came back, just a whole different person. It didn't help my GPA necessarily because I had to learn how to write. I had to put in the work. I had to, it wasn't sort of an automatic where I started getting A's.
Yeah.
But but I started to care, and I started to do my work, and I started to go to class, and I started to apply to colleges outside of Brownsville so that I could find a way to do something that I knew that staying in Brownsville wasn't going to allow me to do. Not that, I mean, I didn't have this like, nothing good comes out of Brownsville, or I hate the Valley. You know, I hear that a lot. I didn't have that. I mean, I love the Valley. I loved it then, and I love it now. I miss it dearly. For me, I didn't trust myself. It wasn't that I didn't trust Brownsville or the Valley. I didn't trust me, because I knew that maybe 6 months into it, I was going to be like, yeah, I'm kind of reintegrating myself back into society, and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
But instead of trying to find out if I could get more hours to work at Sears so that I could pay for my truck, I was trying to cut hours so that I could go to the library and get my work done, and so that I could figure out what schools I was going to apply to and where I was going to go to college.
Wow. So what then? Where did you go?
So that fall, I had gotten accepted to 2 schools. In the Mennonite tradition, there are colleges, like a lot of church denominations that have their religious schools. I had heard about these colleges growing up in the church, and so I thought, that's my way. That's where I'm going to go. These are really great places that I had visited as a kid. So I applied to Eastern Mennonite University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and I applied to Fresno Pacific University in Fresno, California. I got into both on probation. Both of them said that I would need to get at least a 3.0 my first semester, or I would be kicked off. Like they just gave me 1 semester. That was it. Obviously, I chose the West Coast because that's where Maribel was. I had met her that summer, and so I decided to go out west. And I had every ounce of energy in my heart to leave. And then when the time came, it kind of like, the reality of it hit me, right? My parents, whose entire life was the church, made, very, I mean, like a lot of work. I don't even know if it was working class income. I think it was even less than that. I mean, they just made very, very little money. My mom didn't work. My dad was, the minister of the church, and didn't make much money. So it was very clear. And they told me, we're not going to be able to help you out at all. Not only could we not help you with tuition, I couldn't even pay the insurance, like the health insurance payment, which came outside of the student loan. I remember all of that. And I remember having to go to my brother and his family and his wife to ask them to sign a parent loan, because mom and dad's credit got turned. They had such bad credit that they couldn't even get a federal student loan, parent loan, what they called a parent loan.
Yeah. Wow.
They had bad credit with Montgomery Ward. Don't even get me started on how that could have ever happened. I don't remember one piece of furniture in the house or a lawnmower, but apparently we got in trouble with Montgomery Ward credit-wise. And so there was, my brother got out it was $17,000 a year to go to school at Fresno Pacific. And my brother got a $10,000 loan, and I got another $10,000 loan through, loan program or whatever. And I paid my entire, I got a minister's scholarship, $500, because my dad is a preacher, and that's it. And I remember, doing all of that. And I had one of my sisters who was really close to me. She was the only other sibling that had gone to college. She went to A&I in Kingsville, and always pushed me. She's like, she always stayed on me. She's like, you gotta, it doesn't matter how much money you gotta borrow, you have to go, you have to go, you have to do this. So I really credit my sister Anna for encouraging me every step of the way, not to give up and not to be shocked by the loans that I was signing every year. And by the way, some of those loans were, the kind that you had to pay interest while you're in college. So think about that. As a kid not making any money, you've got to pay interest on that loan. And the loan that my brother got for me, I also had to pay interest on that loan while I was in school. When I traded in the Ford Ranger, I got a Mitsubishi Mighty Max. a little truck, white. I called her Princess, and I'll never forget. It must have been August sometime, maybe early August 1997, that I was at my house on 2035 East Taylor in Brownsville. That house steps from Matamoros. So you could walk to, do you know Brownsville at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you know where the university is, I could
Yeah.
walk to the university from my house, basically. So I lived in that area over there. And I remember packing all of my stuff. I took the Instagram of the day. I got all of my Polaroids and I packed them up with me. And I've got a picture I can show you later if I find it, of my roommate. And in the background, I hung all of the pictures of my family and friends from Brownsville. I took my community with me when I got to Fresno. I took everybody with me and I put them up on my wall. That was my wall decoration, were pictures of home. I took a basketball and I took the little clothes that I had and I got in my Mitsubishi Mighty Max and I left the Taylor house in tears. It was my sister Elizabeth, my sister Liz, helping me pack, and my mom. They were the only ones there. And my mom, I don't know. I mean, I love my parents to death. I don't think they understood what was happening. I think they were mostly like, no la vas a hacer, y te vas a tener que venir, y está muy difícil. They were worried about me, but they didn't know how to help me either.
Yeah.
The only way they could help me was to give me a Texaco credit card, a gas card. They gave me a Texaco gas card. I got in my Mitsubishi. I said bye, and I drove to San Antonio from Brownsville. I have a good friend, San Antonio, that I hadn't seen since we were kids. I called him up. I said, hey, man, can I stay with, he lived with his parents at the time. He was going to UT San Antonio. I hadn't seen him in 5 or 6 years. And again, before social media, like when you don't see each other, remember those days, it was like you didn't meet anybody.
Yeah.
And I got to his house and he took me to eat dinner at Hard Rock Cafe on the Riverwalk. He told me, he said, you're crazy. What are you going to do? You're going to Fresno. Do you know anybody? I said, I don't know anybody. I know Maribel. I'm going to go see her, try to see if this relationship will work. But my mother also told me que tenía una tía abuela. I had my grandmother's sister on my mom's side lived in Fresno. So I had a tía Chonita that was there. And my mom told me, acércate a ella, a ver si te ayuda. Get close to her and she can help you. We had dinner that night. We had great memories. And I got up at 5 a.m. and I hit the road on I-10 from San Antonio and I made it all the way to LA and all the way to Fresno. And I never stopped. I didn't get a hotel. I slept in rest areas and I was alone for the first time in my life. I was driving alone on interstates I had no familiarity with. I had $300 in my checking account and I would stop at every Texaco that I found to put gas and buy some food.
Yeah.
And that's how I made it. And I got straight to my tia Chonita's house. I landed there. I lived with her for a week. She was Mormon. I don't know why that matters, but it's strange to me.
Yeah.
And she told me, no te puedo ayudar mucho. I can't help you much, but you can come over every Thursday and I'll feed you dinner and you can do laundry. And because my parents couldn't go with me to Fresno to unpack and do the whole parent thing, I was alone. There was a dinner for all the parents of transfer students because I was considered a transfer student. And I invited my tia Chonita and I went to go pick her up in my little truck in Fresno, brought her to university. She attended. And it meant the world to me. It meant the world to me that my tia Chonita was able to be there with me and support me for the 2 years that I was there at Fresno Pacific University. Life-changing, transformative years.
Wow. You're a history professor, so that's not too far off. I mean, it is, but I mean, you started off by saying you wanted to be a high school football coach and a history teacher. So getting there to Fresno Pacific, history still the route for you?
I was an English major.
Oh,
and I love to write and I love to read, and I grew up with a father that was an orator. Like his sermons, and I saw Dad reading the Bible all the time, and Dad could articulate very well I mean, better in Spanish, but to some extent in English too. And I remember that the admissions counselor at Fresno Pacific on the phone told me, look, based on your grades and what I'm seeing here on paper, I think you should consider another major. This is a very difficult major, and frankly, I don't think that you will succeed. And he told me that on the phone. So here's this white admissions counselor telling this young Mexican American kid, who, by the way, just got back from like a summer talking about race and racism.
Yeah.
And for me, that immediately registered, right? Rather than him saying, hey, look, it's going to be hard, but we're going to support you, yada, yada, yada. He wanted to push me into like kinesiology or like sports or something like that. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, that's not what I want to do. My first semester at Fresno Pacific, as intimidated, and by the way, my dorm was a lifesaver at Fresno Pacific because it was all the outcasts. Like Fresno Pacific is a very wealthy university, and they had very popular kids and well-off, very affluent, majority white institution. It was a predominantly white institution. But our dorm, there was another Chicano guy from El Paso who was there. My roommate was from Nigeria. And the other white guys that were in there were all working class white guys that were on the margins of that university back then. So it was like this like motley crew of guys, man, in there. And the guy from Nigeria, Kalechi, we ended up becoming best of friends. We got along so well. He was into rap and hip hop, and he knew everything that was happening. And he was really interested in the Chicano experience. And then I had Adrian, who was a Chicano from El Paso, who played soccer. They recruited him to play soccer. He hated it there. Oh my goodness, he hated it at Fresno Pacific. And then all these other white guys that were like, outcasts in their own regards. And it was a good place for me to land.
Yeah.
So that first year, I did not get below a 3.0. I think I got a 3.4 or 3.5 my first semester there. And I'm going to tell you that the class that changed my life was a class called American Wilderness and Literature. And it was an English class where we met and we read the nature writers, Terry Tempest Williams, Edward Abbey, John Muir, of course, Sequoia being in the Central Valley in California. Mm-hmm. We read all of these fantastic books about people being monks in the desert, and John Muir, the spirituality of Yosemite and all of that. And then at the end of the class, a biology professor took us to Yosemite National Park. We walked the same path that John Muir walked, the environmentalist, founder of the Sierra Club, all of that. And along the way, the biology professor would explain to us the plant life and the names of this and the names of that. And all I remember is thinking, while I was there, when we were preparing for this field trip, you had to have all these things. You had to have a sleeping bag. You had to have like money. You had to have like different things. And this was the fall, man. Like I had 3 jobs on campus. I was video recording soccer games. I was doing chapel because it was a Christian school. So I was doing chapel, helping the minister do some chapel. And then I was doing cleaning. I would clean like the gym at the end of events and things like that. So I had 3 jobs, and I didn't have a sleeping bag. I didn't have anything, man. So the guys, everybody kind of pitched in and helped me out. And that kind of community, along with my mind was being blown by all of these writers, and to be out in nature was the most beautiful thing ever. And I never looked back, man. That summer or that fall of '97, I became a nerd. The grades got to A's. Everything changed. Everything changed. I didn't know how to stop at that point. I didn't know how to stop. I loved it so much. Yeah. I couldn't wait to get to class. I couldn't wait to read another book. I was so excited. Granted, I was doing this while getting phone calls from the financial aid office saying that my loan had been suspended and did I have an alternative. I was getting calls from my brother saying, we got a bill from the loan. You owe $100 on this interest payment. What are you going to do and how are you going to pay that? And he was calling me on his way to work. Central time he's on his way to work at 7. It was 5 a.m. in California. He's calling me at 5 in the morning in my dorm room. Um, so I was dealing with it, man. Like I was dealing with a lot of just kind of being alone and kind of having to, for the first time in my life, like I was thrown in it. It wasn't just like dealing with classes or finding a sleeping bag. It
Yeah.
was like, I got to pay these interest payments, and the financial aid office keeps calling me saying, I haven't met my payment yet
Yeah.
for the fall semester. So I dealt with a lot that first year. I don't, the second year is like a blur to me, but that first year has never left me. And I think I was telling you earlier about the kind of issues that are resurfacing for me now as I go with my son to visit colleges and universities. Um, and, you know, just kind of, I never dealt with that trauma. I never dealt with it in a significant way because I didn't know any better. It was like sink or swim.
Yeah.
And, you know, I made it, but I didn't do it alone. It was a great university. I met great friends. You know, I would only move my truck on Sundays. I would park it the whole week because I didn't have money for gas, but on Sunday I would go to church about 45 minutes away to a small little Latino Mennonite church in Orange Cove, California. Um, and you know, all of that, um, you know, changed my life, saved my life, I think, to a great degree. Good times, but very, 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 yeah, very stressful, man. Very stressful. I don't wish it on anybody. Certainly not my kid. I feel like every time like my kid goes off on a field trip or something, I like sneak $100 into his pocket and I make sure he's got the newest sleeping bag, you know, because I don't I just don't think poverty. I mean, poverty traumatizes, you know, and it leaves a mark. It leaves a
Yeah.
mark.
You it certainly sounds like you were dealing with a lot. And we're both in higher ed, and I've spent all of my career working with first year students. So I hear, right, there was a period where I was also within my role. I was also a faculty advisor. So students would come in and I'd get to know them, and I'd hear the financial struggles. I'd hear all of these things. But here you were, thousands of miles away from your community, from your home, getting phone calls from your brother, right? Loans being suspended. At any point, did you have a conversation with yourself where you're like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, or maybe I need to go back? Did that ever cross your mind?
That never crossed my mind because I was having too much fun in the classroom. Um, that that idea just never crossed my mind. For me, it was always, well, can I find another loan? Is there another place I can borrow money from? And remember, it's the 90s. So like they were giving credit cards away back
Yeah.
then, you know.
Yeah.
Bank of America was letting you just borrow money. And after 2 years of school there, my last semester having to take 25 credit hours just so I could finish on time. And every semester I was maxed out on hours. I took 18 credit hours. And granted, my story is one. I mean, we were the dorm room that I was in, we were all struggling in our own sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, but I never thought about giving up. I mean, I never thought about it, but I think it was because I had a good, solid community, you know, and I fell in love with learning. If I didn't have the friends that I made there, it might have just been easier to go home,
Yeah.
you know, or if I wasn't doing well academically, but I knew that it was in me. Like I just,
Yeah.
you know, I knew that it was something that I really, really enjoyed doing. And I didn't have all the perks. I didn't have the benefits that a lot of other students had. I had to work all the jobs that I had to work at and do what I needed to do to get a little bit of money and all of that. But you know, those were two of the best years of my life. Two of the best years of my life, no doubt. And driving around in a little Mitsubishi Mighty Max, which by the way, I got tinted windows in Brownsville, and it was too dark. The tinted windows they put in ahí La 14 in Brownsville. I went and some guy he tinted my windows. And you know, I was driving around California for the most part with my windows rolled down so I wouldn't get pulled over, even when it was cold. And then I mean, it was that, and I was an English major, and I'll never forget. Wilfred Martins was my English professor, and I remember going to go see him. I was taking a class, like I think the name of the class was like Shakespeare or something. I mean, it was a ridiculously difficult class. And I remember I went in, and he was like on the phone or something, and I wanted to kind of leave him a note that I wanted to talk to him about my grammar and how I could get better. And I wrote it and I just sort of slid it. And then I kind of waited, and he's on the phone and he kind of looks at the paper, and then he scratches the word grammar out and he spells it Grammar. I had misspelled grammar. Okay. I had misspelled grammar to the English professor. The student that wanted help with grammar misspells it. Anyway, it's a traumatic thing, man. Like I just will never, those little moments. And those were, I mean, you talk about being a faculty member. It's why, and being a mentor, it's why mentorship means so much to me, because like, I just think, I mean, maybe that's the way faculty were back in the day, but I don't think like being that hard or harsh helps, especially working class and first generation students. You know what I mean? Like that kind of intimidation scars you more than helps you. You know what I mean? And when you don't know the system, when you are non-white, when your name doesn't match up with everybody else's at the school, those little things which might seem insignificant, they cut, man. They cut. I went with my head held. I mean, I didn't even talk to him, brother. I left, man. Had my head down and I just took off. He never brought it up. He never said, what did you come see me about? Nothing. And we just moved on.
Wow.
So, you know, mentorship, you talk about mentorship and all that, that means the world to me, especially with students that don't feel like they fit in at a place like Texas A&M, because I see myself in them. And I know that what they need more than anybody is just somebody that will express a sense of care and some idea of solidarity. You know, like that's all the professors that shaped my life. Yeah, they were brilliant, but I don't remember that. I remember that they cared about me as a human being, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You finish up there, Fresno Pacific. And then what was next for you?
So I finished there, and
wait. Did you go back to Brownsville to be a football coach? Is that dream gone?
No, that dream is still with me. That dream is still with me. I wanted to. Well, you know, I mean, I'm dating Maribel. When I graduated, we're engaged, or we're about to get engaged. I don't remember, but I went to go live in an apartment for the summer of '99, because I graduated college in '99. I left Brownsville with 12 credit hours, and I graduated in 2 years at Fresno Pacific. So just do the math in terms of like my summers.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And my semesters, it was intense, right? But I knew I didn't want to borrow any money. I left with almost $40,000 in debt just in 2 years of school. So which is why I believe in student debt forgiveness. And even though I've paid my loans, I wish that on nobody.
Yeah.
Like the federal government should absolutely pay everybody's loans. That's my belief. I wholeheartedly believe in that. But I lived with these guys. It was great. It was a great group of guys. We were multi-ethnic. There was a Korean guy, another Chicano guy, and Hawaiian dude. And we were in an apartment for the summer of '97. I worked at a hardware store again. I went back, but it wasn't Sears. It was something else. One of these standalone Ace Hardware kind of stores. I did that. And then the same organization that had put together the drama team in '96 was hiring in South Texas to do community work with churches, to get border churches in the Valley engaged in social justice work, and especially anti-racism education, not just in the Valley, but the job description said Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, right? Different parts of the state. So I jumped on that opportunity because there weren't any other takers, man, at that point. I was working at Ace Hardware. I still did not think about graduate school. I was just like, I got to get a job, man. I got to make money.
Yeah.
Ace Hardware helped me pay the rent that summer. And then I drove back to the Valley the fall of 97 to start with Mennonite Central Committee, MCC, the organization. And I opened up an office in Edinburgh, Texas in the year 2000. And same year I got married. My wife left California and we both moved into Edinburgh. We lived right off of the square in Edinburgh, Business 281.
Yeah.
And we lived right off of Business 281. And when I was there and I was working with the organization, I seriously thought this, man, like this was my thinking. I thought, okay, I'm going to work with this organization for a few years, kind of make a little bit of money. I wasn't making much. I was making 20 something. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but I thought, let me get on my feet, start paying these loans, start doing something, right? Plus, I really liked the work. I liked that kind of engagement with race, community, churches, that sort of thing. And I thought, well, I'm here. UT Pan American's like right there. Like, let me go check the master's program, because if I can get a master's degree, don't they pay you more if you're a high school coach and a teacher with a master's degree? That was my justification to go and get a master's degree. And I sign up and I do it in history. And they tell me, you're an English major. So UTPA made me take 12 hours of undergrad history before I could get into the MA program in history at UTPA.
Wow.
So I started that in 2001. I took a class with Dr. Salmon. Do you remember Dr. Salmon in history?
Dr. Salmon.
Or Dr. Rocha? Do you remember Rocha?
Yeah, I know. I remember Dr. Rocha. Dr. Salmon sounds familiar, but I do remember Dr. Rocha well.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah.
But Dr. Salmon was a small man, but just a mighty thinker, man. I mean, I took an undergraduate Mexican-American history class with him. And that class was another turning point in my journey, in my educational journey, because I knew at that point that I wanted to do history, that history is confirmed for me, that history was my path, and Chicano history in particular. Like that for me did it that semester with him. He ended up becoming my thesis advisor at UT Pan American. I greatly benefited from his mentorship. He was a kind and gentle soul, but a harsh critic of, Gringolandia and, anti-Mexican sentiment. He was a harsh critic of it. And I learned a lot from him about grace, believe it or not. I learned a lot from him about, because you have to imagine that I was sort of like a budding Chicano nationalist, man. Like I was like getting there. Okay. So all of these years of talking about race, I'm taking a Chicano history class. Now it's mi raza primero, the hell with everybody, But when I meet Salmon is like, he's reading my thesis and he's like, Felipe, there was racism. I get it. You say it, every other word is racism this, racism that, racism this. Were there other factors? Like, what about class? Did that matter to missionaries in the Valley? And what about, immigration? And what about all these other things? And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, let me think about that. And he would talk a lot about coalition building with other racial and ethnic groups, right? And white folks and black folks. And what does that mean? And how can we think about these sorts of things critically? So he was the right person for me at that point in my life. I didn't need a kind of harsh Rocha approach, the hell with the gringo kind of thing. I didn't need that. I'm not saying that was his philosophy necessarily, but that's what he exuded.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rocha would have said there needs to be more racism.
There's more, right?
Yeah,
right. So anybody hearing me out there, I'm not dissing on him. I'm just saying that's the politics. This is a man that was smoking in his office, man. Like I would walk in, UT Pan, it's like 2003, man. This dude's smoking. Anyway, I am, I'm with Dr. Salmon. It was the best decision. And then while I'm there, Professor John Chavez from Southern Methodist University, somebody told us, we were there, right? It's like, hey, this professor is going to come. He wants to recruit PhD students. PhD. Absolutely not. Too much money. I don't even know what the hell that is. I don't have any desire to do that. But I kept getting nudged. And people in seminar who had no desire to go forward would tell me, they're like, I know you want to do this to get paid because you want to work at the school district. And they would tell me, like, I work at the school district. You do not want to work at the school district. You've got potential, man. Like, they told me, like, you could probably make it, you know? And John Chavez came down, talked to us from SMU. But the game changer was when Professor Lupe San Miguel and Professor Luis Alvarez from the University of Houston came down to Pan American. Trini Gonzalez, who is a great friend of mine. I don't know if you know Trini. Yeah, so Trini is a great friend of mine. He was at the University of Houston at that time, maybe a 4th or 5th year graduate student at that point. He was ahead of me. I was thinking about UT Austin also. And Trini was the guy that said, nah, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. Right? Yeah. You don't want to go there. You want to go to Houston, University of Houston. I was like, okay, well, what about it? I've never heard of it. I know UT, Americo Paredes, and they had Neil Foley at that time. David Montejano had been there. So Trini says, let me get some faculty down here. So he invited and organized for Lupe and for Luis Alvarez to come down. They took us out to dinner in Reynosa. I remember I met Luis Alvarez, who teaches now at UC San Diego. He's written 2 great books, Chicano historian. I respect him greatly. I remember the first time I met him, I said, oh, what year graduate student are you? Because he looks so young. I'm like, you can be that young and be faculty? Like, every professor I had was like 100 years old,
Yeah.
And after that experience with them, and then going to visit the University of Houston and conversations with my wife and family and all that, I decided to take the leap, and we moved to Houston to start graduate school in 2004, to start my PhD studies in 2004. I had written a master's thesis. This was back in the day when you could write a master's thesis that was like 300 pages, and nobody said anything. It was like normal,
Yeah.
Nowadays people are like, a master's thesis, but back then I wrote a pretty long one, did a lot of research, a lot of oral history interviews, which, by the way, are now at the Library of Congress for that first master's thesis that I did. I interviewed people like in La Grulla, all those little pueblitos out in the west end of the valley, Rio Grande, La Grulla, Sullivan City, because that's where a lot of the Mennonite missionaries had gone out in the 1930s out there. So I did that, and I went to U of H. I got a campus visit, and I'll never forget, we get a campus visit, and it's Jesse Esparza, another good friend of mine, really talented scholar, gifted, really smart. And he was a student at the time. He's taking us around, me and 2 other guys from Pan Am who were graduate students. And Lupe San Miguel said, go do the tour. I teach a Chicano history seminar tonight. Come into the seminar, sit in, and then we'll go get dinner or something afterwards. Fantastic, man. It was like, great. We were from the Valley, us 3. We had never seen a Starbucks before, okay? So we're on the campus of U of H, and there's a Starbucks, and we're like, dang, Starbucks. So we each go and get these like mocha frappuccino, frappa, extra whip, extra this, extra caramel. We walk in, all 3 of us, y chonchitos. I was chubby back then, man. We were all chubby. We walk in with our big frappuccinos, into that seminar. It was the most embarrassing thing because everybody was very sophisticated then, right? Everybody had coffee, and they're sitting down with their legs crossed and all of that. None of us could do that. We're too chubby. You can cross your legs. So, but I remember being in Lupe San Miguel's class, sipping on a mocha frappuccino, and not just like a tall, man. I mean, I said, all 3 of us said, give us the large one. We were enamored. We were just like, whoa, a Starbucks. This is incredible. I mean, it was a big deal back then. Needless to say, I knew UH was going to be my place because not only did they care about academics, and it was rigorous and all of that, and I cared about that, but there was also kind of a political edge to it. There was a sense that the seminar space was a political space. Luis Alvarez and Raul Ramos always talked to us about, how we do this for the community and the kind of work that we do and how this benefits the broader public. That's what I had grown up in church, like that, the nonprofit work that I had done in Edinburgh for all those years. And then I get to UH and they're like, we're going to put together academics with social justice. And I was like, that's exactly what I want. And I didn't want to go to SMU. I didn't want to go anywhere else. I thought, and because I didn't have tenure track kind of idea in my head of what I wanted to do. Um, I wasn't even thinking of that. I only thought about UH because I fell in love with the space, kind of in the same way that I did with Fresno Pacific. I was like, this is a great place for me. UH is also a great place. I love that place. Go Cougs. I fell in love with Houston, the whole city, the university, the history department there. I have fond memories.
Don't want to coach high school football. I joke, but also, like, I remember, I graduated from Ed Cal Chelsea. I wanted to coach high school.
La máquina Maria, right?
Yeah, I wanted to coach high school football.
So, you guys were a powerhouse in the 90s, by the way. You were powerhouse, brother. That is for sure, man.
My undergrad and my master's thesis was about La Máquina Maria. Was a collection of oral histories, and so that was a lot of fun. But so I joke, but it's interesting, right? The influences and that shape us, right? And man, I could see myself totally doing this or totally doing that, and it sounds like your story, like you said, all of these pieces, right? The church, the spaces that you were able to take part in, where you could have these conversations, the social justice work, whether it was the community work, whether it was in that caravan doing the anti-racism troop, all of it sounds like you found it all come together at U of H. So you finish up,
came together. Yeah.
You finish up, and then
what
was next?
I finished up in 2009. 5 years it took me to finish the PhD, 2 years of coursework, 3 years of dissertation and research and all of that. And oh man, the dream was to go back to the Valley. No more to coach football. I had kind of moved on from that, primarily because I thought I invested a lot in this education. I need to kind of step it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I went back to the Valley, and my dream was to teach at South Texas College at that point. I wanted to get a job there. Or even at Pan Am if they would hire me, and live in the Valley, barbecue every weekend, go to protest marches, raise some babies, have a family. My entire family's in Brownsville. I would have lived a great life. And then A&M puts out a job offer for a position, not just in 20th century history, 20th century Latino history. And I remember I'm at Starbucks on 10th and Nolana.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if it's still there, if that Starbucks is still there. But it was one of the larger ones. And we would all go and put our laptops and stay there for 12 hours. You know what I mean? Like, we'd be there todo el santo dia, man.
Yeah.
Just typing away, drinking coffee, and having all these great conversations. Anyway, I'm there, and Trini, I mentioned Trini Gonzalez earlier. He's there as well. And we're talking about this job ad, and Trini's like, you should apply. And I'm like, I don't have a shot to get that job. There's no way I'm applying. He's like, just do it. Then you test the waters, and you don't get it, but it's a practice. Okay. I did it. I got an interview. I don't know, man. The American Historical Association is where all the interviews happened. And this would have been fall of 2008. My interview was in January of 2009. I go to New York City, where the conference was, where we all interviewed. And I interviewed there. And then me and Trini went all over that city, learning a little bit of Puerto Rican history. And I went to visit the church that got occupied in East Harlem that I wrote this book about. Okay, so back then empieza la idea about, I want to write about this church.
Yeah.
Then I get the campus interview. And I'm like, the biggest concern with my campus interview was that I didn't have a suit. And primarily because I didn't think I could fit into a suit. I was almost 300 pounds back then. I was big, man. So I was like, it's not that I don't have a suit. I've got one. I just can't fit into it from high school, my prom or whatever. And so I went out and I bought a suit at JCPenney, made it to the interview, did the interview, didn't think I had any chance. But I got the call back. I went up. I know that the people that were applying for the job were very gifted, very talented people from pretty elite institutions. And whatever I did, or by the grace of God, or however it happened, I got the job. And I started at Texas A&M in the fall of 2009. So you're talking about a kid that goes from, not knowing how he's going to pay that tuition bill in the fall of 97 to about 12 or so years later, teaching at a pretty prestigious Research One institution. And I was in complete shock. There was a good while there, my first few years at A&M, where the story in my head was, I don't know how I got here. I don't know how this happened.
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't be here. It has taken me years, and I think I'm just got promoted to full professor, and I think I'm finally at the place where I say I feel very comfortable. I feel like I belong, but that took a long time, and I know that a lot of us out there go through that.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have survived it without the kind of mentorship that I got. And so the theme with me is every step of the way, people in positions ahead of me that kind of took me under their wing and said, just calmate, you're going to be all right. You're going to be okay. Don't freak out. Just do this, do your job, go to work every day, write your papers, publish, and you're going to be fine. No promises. Nobody made any promises to me about what was happening or anything. They just said, we're here. We're going to support you. Let's have a good time. Let's go get some drinks, whatever. Let's talk about it. But continue doing your work is what they always told me. And when you have community,
yeah,
when you have support, doing the work is possible.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it's possible any other way. I just don't. I've seen too many people leave the profession, because of their own sort of, bouts with insecurity or whatever it might be. And oftentimes I think it had something to do with the fact that somewhere along the way, they lost their confidence. They were, hurt in some way. Something happened. There was a moment, that kind of dissuaded them. And, I think it's hard work. I think it's mentorship. And I really believe this, brother. I think it's a little bit of luck along the way,
Yeah.
I just don't see it any other way.
Yeah. When I started the podcast, I started it because this is pandemic. This is my first year students coming in, and the anxiety level was through the roof. And I'd already noticed it. I'm listening to students. I talked to all of my students, and I sensed it earlier. I sensed it, years before that. But man, in 2020, they were really vocal about it. And I remember one class where I said, I'm teaching this first year experience course, and I'd typically leave like a week or two off the syllabus. And I'd say, hey, I want to hear from you all. What do you all want to learn about? What are you concerned about? What do you need to know? Overwhelming majority. Can we talk about anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about social anxiety? Can we talk about stress? So, digging deeper, and a lot of them are like, we have early college, high schools, and these are wonderful things, right? That kids can take and get, 2 years of college paid for, right? But they're coming in and they're like, I don't know that I want to do this. I don't know that I want to do, I've got an associate's in this. I don't know if I want to continue down that path, or I have no idea what I want to do.
Yeah.
And the adults around me tell me I've got to figure it out. Right. Now we've got ninth graders, eighth graders. You've got to pick a designation. You've got to pick a path. And so I felt almost, obligated to say, look, if you're 18 and you've got it figured out, you're doing better than everybody else, because nobody does that.
Right.
And so part of the podcast was actually the whole impetus of the podcast was to show them that nobody has a straight line. I think, I think I'm into like episode 90 something now. And I can count on one hand how many folks knew what they were going to do at 18 and did that. Less than 5, 2 or 3, I think. And so it was just to kind of put them at ease and say, look, we don't know. We're 18. We don't know where we're going to go. We don't know what the future might hold for us. We don't know what the experience is, but keep moving forward and have a
Exactly.
plan and find
Right.
mentors and do. And so thank you. Cause I think, your story, you're absolutely right. Right. You found community and you found mentorship and you kept doing the work. And I think that's so important that we continue to move forward and continue to do the work. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for having me. And I feel a tremendous a tremendous debt that I have to pay back to students today,
Mm-hmm.
and um, it's why I'm so committed, or at least I try to be as committed as I can to my students, to be there for them, to model something different for them, to help them understand that they're not alone in this process, because I'm not here without that kind of mentorship. And to be able to see now, when I've been in this for 13 years, I see students that are now well on their way to their own graduate degrees, that are practicing lawyers, that are doing incredible work um, in the community, and I see them now taking on that mantle of responsibility for mentorship in their own circles and in what they do. I'm working to fill out college applications for my son right now. Actually, we're all done. We did it over the summer and try to get them in as early as possible. But I was blown away by the difficulty of that process,
Mm-hmm.
of how much is asked for. And here I am with a PhD. My wife has a PhD as well, and we were struggling with a lot of stuff on there, with the enormity of it in terms
Yeah.
of what is required. And so to think about how working class parents that are that didn't go to college themselves, and they're the students coming out of there are first gen, the difficulty of all of that, I think, highlights the real importance of the mentorships at universities, the people that play roles as admissions counselors, the people that play roles in high school as counselors, or helping students get to college and fill out college applications and all of that. We all play a role at different levels. I might be at the university, but it's all part of a bigger family here, where we're trying at different places, trying to see if we can help as many students as we can. And it's great to meet somebody like you that's on this journey as well, and doing it in a different place than I am. I think that gives me much joy and comfort, knowing that we've got great people that are doing this work across the spectrum, either in the classroom, outside of it, whatever it may be. It's always a really refreshing and wonderful thing. So thank you.
Well, Felipe, I know this is I'm hoping, and I'll make sure this happens. This is just the first of many conversations for us.
Sure.
Before we close out, any final words for our listeners out there?
Well, I mean, things are, things are and have been for a good while now, very difficult. I can understand your comment about anxiety and the levels of anxiety, because I feel it as well. I think that in terms of kind of making it through that, I hope that everybody out there works as hard as they can to push back against any desire to isolate, to push back against any desire to kind of go it alone. Reach out for help, ask people, find friendships, build those friendships as you go about and do this work. And I just want to highlight something you mentioned earlier too, that part of finding community. I think another big part of that is to make sure that even if you don't know what you want to do, even if you don't have it figured out, that's okay. The big thing is just keep moving forward, keep dreaming, keep imagining, and keep setting those goals that you have in your life. Keep doing that kind of work, even if you're not sure.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you would have asked me, are you on track to become a professor at a university? There's absolutely no way. That was never in my mindset until I got to the University of Houston. Even at Pan Am, that wasn't what my thinking yet. So,
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I thought I could adjunct. I was like, I'll adjunct. I'll adjunct. I'll teach you a couple of classes at night. It'll
Yeah.
be great. Thank you, Jose. I appreciated this conversation, man. It was great to go back.
Felipe, thank you. This concludes another episode of the Way to College podcast. Make sure you subscribe, rate, follow, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again. Bye-bye.